Today's guest has built Luminary, one of the most respected communities for women in business, and she did it without any outside funding. From new waves of women rejecting the modern feminist girl boss movements to the impact of return to office culture, we cover it all. Please welcome Cate Luzio.
People that are not effective in running their businesses need to be called out. We also had a differentiator in that we were both a B2C community and a B2B. And then it's not if you build it, they will come. It's if you build something that people need, they will come. I would never have known how to price this.
Cate, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you on.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
This is going to be great. Well, I think it's best if we start with kind of like a little bit in your childhood because you have a really awesome and interesting background. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to have a father who was an FBI agent?
It was definitely an experience in that my parents really didn't amplify it. I think one, he was undercover a lot. So like this is back when people used the yellow pages, but our phone number was unlisted. We didn't really talk about it to our friends, but my mom in particular really isolated us from like the big deal that it was. And he was mafia, narcotics, organized crime. So a lot of undercover but it was also just really great to have a dad that was fighting crime. He worked so hard. I mean, where I got my mom worked so hard too, but where I think I got my incredible work ethic is really from my dad. He went 100 miles an hour all the time, but he also gave so much to the team that he worked on, his squad, and the community, so that when he retired, you have to retire. And I don't know if it's changed now, but at the age of 57, he actually got a dispensation because he was 57 during right after September 11th. So he ended up staying for a little bit longer. But at his retirement party, it was just so apparent that even in an organization like the FBI, he had created community and people respected him. And I think that level of respect for me really turned into, is this what I want to do with my life? Because I really just love what he did. And
that's amazing. And did you ever consider like following in his footsteps?
I did.
Okay.
So when I went to college, I went to the University of Maryland for my undergrad, and they have a fabulous, and now it's even better, criminology program. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to do a political science major, minor in criminology, and follow in his footsteps. And that's really what I thought I was going to do. And then it just didn't work out that way. And it's funny, like many years later when I was in finance, my dad actually pulled me aside because I had always said, like, I'm going to be like you. I'm going to join the FBI. He was very happy that I didn't follow in his footsteps. He wanted me to create my own path and do the things that I want to do and have an impact in a different way. But that was really like when I went to college, I was like, I'm going to get an internship at the FBI. I'm going to be in the FBI. And there's a whole story around that.
And can you share with our audience the story of why you didn't get the internship? You can give us the Coles Notes.
Yes, I can give you the very short. So this is back in the early 90s and in the FBI at the time. And again, FBI, if you're listening, I don't know if it's still the same, but back then the application was like 30 pages long. Whether you were going to be an FBI agent, apply, or you're applying for an internship. And by the way, the internship was like being a tour guide at the headquarters in DC. This is not secret, I'm not getting clearance. And the last page of the application is your drug history. Now, that summer before, I had followed the Grateful Dead, and I had tried pot one time, literally one time, and out of many shows. And I remember talking to one of my brothers, and he's like, it's one time. Don't write that you've done it. Like, it's no big deal. But I just can't lie. And so it literally, as I'm walking into this interview, and my friend drove me from college, I like to check the box. So interview's going great. We get to the end. She's like looking at it and she's like, wait a second. You have a drug history. I immediately start crying. I'm like, it's one time, like really one time. It was at a concert and I've learned my lesson. And she's like, it's a rule. We can't admit you. And you're going to have to wait a full year before you apply again. Now, that was devastating to me. But then the other thing she said was, well, your dad's in the FBI. If he looks into why you didn't get the role or the internship, he can find out. So I would highly recommend you tell him. So again, a long story short, I get in the car. One of my best friends, she's driving. I'm like, go to the mall. I need some retail therapy. Before I called my parents, I have to go back to college. I said, Mom, and my mom answered. I'm like, can you put Dad on the phone too? So now they're thinking, what is she dropping out? And I'm like, and I tell the story. My dad is speechless. And my mom says, I'm very proud of you for telling the truth. You could have just lied on that application. Also, didn't know I would have also had to take a polygraph. So I would have got caught anyway. And then my dad sort of was like, I'm disappointed because you wanted to do this. But this is an experience you have to go through. Probably not in those nice words. And so then those years later, when it came up that I didn't pursue this, he was actually very happy that that experience had happened. And also it showed me that I had to have resilience and manage through both a very difficult conversation and a very difficult scenario and situation. And how could I come out on the other side?
I love that. Well, that's a great lesson, and it sounds like you have great parents.
I do.
Also, as someone, I've done drugs at a Grateful Dead concert, and it's really fun. So, I mean, you probably had a great time.
I did. I
And
did.
it put you on the exact path that you needed to be on.
Yes.
So I think that that was all absolutely worth it. Obviously, you didn't go straight from, no internship to starting your company now. You had a really interesting path as a banker, and you worked in corporate. But I'm curious, what was the moment that you decided, okay, this is like the exact moment I'm ready to make the leap and start my own company?
I had a very pivotal conversation with a mentor and a sponsor, and he said, is this really what you want to do? You didn't set out to be a banker. That wasn't like your lifelong goal. You got recruited into it. What I know about you is you want impact. And so are you able to have the impact that you want? And in 10 years, this is what you want to continue to be doing. Money aside, right?
Yeah.
Because money is a big driver in any role in finance. And I went home and I had never thought about it that way. I just was just I'm a Gen Xer, so it was like go, 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 and there's nothing wrong with that. And I give my background and the way I was raised to that. But once I opened myself up to a different kind of thinking, was yeah, maybe I want to do something different. I can do a lot of different things. I'm pretty great. I mean, literally, like I've been recruited for most of the jobs that I'm in, so there's got to be something that I'm good at, or why they keep hiring me. And 2 weeks later, I was like, I'm going to do something different. And then in that, because I think I gave myself the space to kind of see what else is out there, I had this idea for what is now Luminary. And I don't think if I had been in my job, because I give 150%, I would have ever been able to create, like literally create something. And I had, even the day before I wrote the business plan, if you had asked me, are you excited? Like, do you want to be an entrepreneur? I would have said, hell no. Like, I don't want to do that. My younger brother was an entrepreneur. No, thank you. And then once I wrote this idea down, it couldn't get out of my head. And then I had to finish what I started in writing this business plan. Then I did my financials and then called all the people that I was talking to and interviewing with. And I said, I'm pausing. I am actually going to go and start my own company. And 8 months later, Luminary's physical location was up and running.
That's amazing. And then how did you like decision map this and do this business plan? Like, how did you, tactically approach this? Because a lot of times on this podcast, we have a lot of like young women who listen and they're around college age, and like a lot of them maybe don't have degrees in business and they don't have the banking background. So I'm curious, just more from like a tactical standpoint, like what are the questions that you asked yourself and like how did you do those financials?
So one of the things that I did in my roles in finance, and I before finance, I was working at a tech startup, right? And I was wearing lots of hats because it was a small team. So you learn, I think, by listening and just being around people that are building and creating and those visionaries. And so that was like, again, very early in my career, just watch that. Now, I never thought that that was going to be my path, but obviously somewhere deep inside, I think I sort of went back to those roots. But I also took all of the strategic planning that I did for my businesses, my teams, and said, okay, let's go back to basics and actually just write a business plan. What's the opportunity? What's the problem? What does the market look like? I didn't even know what was out there. I knew there were WeWorks and traditional co-working spaces, none of which I would have ever worked at because I worked in an office. And so I had to really educate myself on what the market looked like, competition, which lots of people don't want to look at. And then I literally followed a business plan. I filled out every section, probably to my detriment because it was like 50 pages. But that also allowed me to like look at it, refine, 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 refine. If I go back to that original, I was trying to do way too much. So I had to go, okay, what are the 3 things that I can start with and then build on that? And then once I wrote it, it was about 2 weeks of like nonstop sort of thinking and creating in my pajamas. I wrote it. I showed it to my partner. I showed it to a couple of people. And they were like, this is something. And then I did my financial projections. And by the way, for people that don't have that background, by the way, now you have ChatGPT. You can do so much with AI,
Yeah.
but there are incredible templates, on the internet. And I now teach, and I have been for the last 6 years, every single month, sometimes more than once a month, a business plan boot camp for this specific reason. And it's free for anybody to join so that they can get the foundation of writing a business plan and creating your North Star so that you have a plan and a path so that you can measure where you're at versus I have this great idea and I'm just going to go for it. What happens if there's no market for it? What if you need people? How much money do you need to start this? And I think a lot of times, I think there's a lot of naivete around that, and sometimes you need a little bit of that. But I think a plan is really important.
I agree. And I'm curious now that you mentioned like the North Star, how has your North Star changed for Luminary versus like when you first started to what that North Star is today? Or is it the same?
I would say the North Star, the mission is the same. How we deliver it is obviously evolved. I mean, we were a year old when the pandemic hit, a little over a year old. In 2019, our first full year of operations, everything had to be done was in person at our physical location in Nomad. So that meant the companies we worked with, the individuals, they were coming in every day or coming in for events. Pandemic happens overnight. We're like, well, wait a second. We have built this community. We've got to continue to provide for this community. It's just going to look a little different while we wait out this pandemic. And we're going to do it via Zoom and online. And 3 months into it, members were like, or even non-members were calling and saying, how do I get access to this content? And so we created a digital membership. And this is why people always say, well, you pivoted in the pandemic. I'm like, no, no, no. We didn't change course. We didn't change direction. We adapted to the environment, just like all of us are adapting to our environment constantly. And how we deliver the impact looks a little different than the original business plan.
And so for those who don't know, how would you describe Luminary in like, a few sentences, just for those who aren't
So
familiar?
now we are a global professional education and networking platform. We're gender inclusive, we always have been, but our goal and our mission when we started out in 2019 was to advance women and allies in the workforce regardless of professional journey. So if you're working inside a company or if you're an entrepreneur or you're just kind of figuring out your next step, our goal is to provide tools, resources, and the peer network that you can tap into regardless of your goal and help you define or redefine your version or vision of success. And so we do that through the content, through the events and workshops, but more importantly through the global community that you can tap into and you never know who you're going to meet.
So how did you go when you first started about actually building this incredible community? Like what were some of your approaches in marketing to kind of bring people in?
So we knew right off the bat, again, from a financial standpoint, I knew nothing about social media and ads. So I think, again, anybody out there, like, don't put money behind something if you don't understand it. And I knew I didn't understand that. And I wasn't ready to hire somebody we needed social, but not to that degree. So we really started with a grassroots effort. One, it was me tapping into my network. And even for people that said, I'm not ready to join, it's like, great, but can you talk about it? Can you share it? Because organic marketing, I think, for something like what we do is critical, and that word of mouth. We did through I Fund Women, even though I self-funded the business, we did an I Fund Women crowdfund campaign purely to market the business so we could reach more people outside of just my network. We raised or generated over $350,000 worth of memberships. So before we even opened our physical doors, we had over 100 members. And then, I'm a big believer in that if you have a good experience and you find value in something, that you talk about it to people, right? Think about any restaurant you've been to or great customer service experience you've had. you talk about it. And that's really what drove that first year, was just people saying, bringing in, we did a lot of events. We had open houses just because we were new in the neighborhood. And we were also trying to differentiate ourselves, that we weren't just a co-working space that was an amenity within the space, but we were really this community, and we were providing all of this great programming and workshops, and that we also had a differentiator, and that we were both a B2C community and a B2B.
Mm.
So before, again, we even opened, I was out there talking to former places of work,
Yeah.
former clients, and saying, here's another way or a different way to invest in your employees by giving them access to what we offer. And so JP Morgan was our first, Goldman Sachs, then we had Heidrick and Struggles, Girls Inc. And so that also really helped us start to build a very diverse, multi-generational and intersectional community kind of right off the bat. And I knew leading from the top was really important, but I also needed to hire a great team that also had different perspectives, different backgrounds. And my COO at the time, my head of community, she was our chief impact officer. So she was really charged with building a curriculum and all the programming. Those weren't things that I knew how to do. So bringing that original team together, and then having them live and breathe it too into their networks, that's how you build a community in my mind. And then it's not if you build it, they will come. It's if you build something that people need, they will come.
I mean, that's an amazing point
Yeah.
because it's so true. And there's been a lot of co-working spaces that have, started and then now they're no longer here for various reasons. I think your differentiator to be like B2B and then also B2C is like really important. I'm very curious though, in the beginning stages, like how did you go about pricing the membership fees when maybe you have like a vision of what you want this membership to look like, but maybe it's not quite there just yet, or you're building towards something? Like, how did you price that in? Because I'm sure a lot of women listening like have a vision for what they want something to look like, but it's that weird sort of in between phase of getting there that they're like a little bit stuck on.
This is where within your business plan, your market analysis and your competitive analysis comes in. I mean, I would never have known how to price this, right? All I knew, to be very honest, was when I lived in London for many years, I tried to join both, sorry to say the brand, but the Soho House and the Shoreditch House, which were part of the same, 5 times. And I never got in. And I had the discretionary income to pay for it. And because I was a banker and that's not who they were targeting. I mean, people were like, lie about who you are. Tell them you're a stylist. I'm like, but you can Google me.
Also, did you not hear my story about the FBI? I
Yeah.
cannot lie.
Exactly.
You're
It's like,
"This
I
is not
cannot
for
lie,
me."
right? And so I realized too that I needed to understand these spaces. And so number one, I knew we were not going to have an application process, because when you go back to that other question around how do you build community, I want to break down barriers. That's what a community truly does. It's like welcomes you in. How do I support you? And then how do you give back too? So no application process. And then from there, looking across different members clubs, co-working spaces, private clubs, the old boys clubs, like what did they charge and what were you getting out of that? And the other thing was, I knew we needed to be very flexible. People want flexibility in their lives. They don't think about it. You join a gym, you don't want to be locked in for the year. You never can get out of it. So we have annual pricing, we have monthly pricing. You can pause your membership. We have a scholarship program. So all of that was created out of just doing a really solid market and competitive analysis and knowing what would I want out of this. What were the kind of the bells and whistles outside of the physical location that I wanted to provide? And then backing into, okay, and what's that worth? I think we probably provide more, but we've also been very upfront. Like, we don't want to keep raising prices, especially for longtime members that have been with us from the beginning. We say they're grandmothered into any pricing that we ever do. And even when we do an acquisition, if they're already paying a membership price for their whatever that membership or that community was, we grandmother them into that rate.
Oh, that's amazing. And so you have this incredible community that you've built. When you were first starting, was there a moment where you're like, wow, this is really working? Like, what was that first experience like for you?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both. I think there's this is really working because people were coming.
Okay.
And people kept coming back. And then they were telling their friends about it. And it wasn't about me placing ads. It was also really hard, right? I mean, you building community, investing in a community, it's a daily thing. It is not, hey, I've built this and now it just happens. You put everything you have, and I do it every day. And so does my team. When the pandemic hit, obviously people were scared and we lost a lot of individual members because people, if you go back to that time, they're like, am I going to lose my job? What's going to happen? But slowly but surely, we were seeing people coming back and joining even if they moved, and that's who was asking for the digital membership. We now get so many people that maybe have left or said, okay, I've got a financial hardship, that come back. And to me, it's working. I had an event this morning. We had about 50 people at a breakfast around, what drives you and what's driving your terms and your version of success. And when people say that part of their story now is that they've gotten so much out of Luminary and the community, and I don't have to say anything, it's working
But was there a moment where you think that, or where you thought that this might not work?
every day. I mean, that's the other thing I don't think people talk about because it is so hard. And by the way, this is anyone's, not just entrepreneurs. I think, whether you're working in a corporate, you're working higher ed, nonprofit. For me, there's that everyday moment of reflection. Like, this is really hard. And when is it going to get easier? And the reality is it's likely not going to get easier because we have big goals and we want to impact more people. But I think I would be doing a disservice to people by saying it's amazing. But there are lots of moments of reflection of is this creating impact? Can I create more impact? There's also this immense amount of pressure to scale, scale, scale. And we have scaled dramatically, but it's not in the same frames that everybody else uses as scale. Like, why doesn't Luminary have 30 locations around the country? I don't want that. That's why we have a partner network and we have more than 50 partners around the globe, just a different way to scale. And so I think oftentimes it looks so great on social media, the article that's written in the media, and people don't talk about how hard it is. And there's a lot of fear. Is this going to continue to work? What happens if it doesn't? And the thing that I have to go through in a self-reflection is say, if this doesn't work out, and this goes back to that mentor conversation, and you decide this isn't what you want to do anymore, and you can do that. Look at how much you've learned in the process and that how much you can apply to something else. And I think that's sometimes when we're in it every day, you forget that.
That's really, really good advice. And you kind of, when you're self-funding something, you kind of have to teach yourself everything.
Everything.
So I do think that that is excellent, excellent advice. I want to kind of dive in a little bit here and chat through the state of work right now, that people are kind of slowly going back into office. Work culture is starting to kind of shift again post-COVID. What trends are you seeing for your community at the moment?
Well, and this is not just within the community. I mean, we're seeing it in a lot of surveys. Employees in the traditional workforce are feeling the most unengaged they ever have. And that is saying a lot considering we went through a global pandemic where everybody was affected. People are feeling overworked, under-resourced, and quite frankly, I think just anxious about the world. And that impacts productivity. If you were historically someone that gotten used to the remote or need that flexibility, and now you're being told you've got to come in 4 or 5 days a week, it's a huge mindset shift. We need culture transformation. We need, more leadership engagement. But one of the things that we focus on at Luminary is what we call the power middle. But 80% of the workforce is the middle, and it's often described as the messy middle, the frozen middle, in particular for women. We started talking about this in 2019. The power middle, we've got to empower middle management. And I don't just mean managers. I just mean people that are the doers. They're working every day. Without them, we don't have senior people. Without them, we don't have customers. And so I think they're feeling very disenfranchised right now. And so they're looking to their companies for more investment, for more benefits, for more opportunities to connect and engage. And part of the reasons we have this B2B platform is so that we can help provide and deliver that for these companies in a different way.
And what is that? That's great. I agree. What does that look like in practice?
We will go in both virtually and physically and do bespoke custom workshops based on what they're hearing from their employees. Like, we want better communication tools. We want better self-advocacy. We want to get rid of imposter syndrome. We want to learn how to use AI. So we are then delivering these types of workshops. And then the other thing is, and we bought this company called The Crew in 2023, is peer-to-peer coaching. Coaching usually comes in either for senior executives or those that are not doing well. We want to sort of democratize that and get peers in a room virtually for the most part, where they're able to peer coach one another, but guided by an executive coach that can help provide guardrails and sort of get them together, and then do that around goal setting and objectives versus let me just get in a room and talk about myself. What are the things that are holding you back? What are your goals for the next quarter, the next year? And how do we as a group, in addition to yourself, help get you there?
This is so needed. I'm like, I need this at my company.
Yeah.
I do have a really great head of content, shout out Deanna, who actually mentors like the people
Yep.
that are a little bit more in the middle. And she's like, career growth is so important to me. Like, I want everyone to feel like they're on a good path. So she really helps there and has made like a huge difference, like really important difference.
And it makes a huge difference. I look again at that same mentor
Mhm.
that was also a sponsor. I was at JP Morgan, he really became a great sponsor. Then he left, and then he really took that into becoming a great mentor. He's still a mentor. Like, I look at the mentors in my career, especially within finance, but even before that, and how impactful they were and how it wasn't formal. It wasn't a program. It was just people doing the right thing for one another and wanting to invest in the pipeline and wanting to say, oh, wow, Jade, I know you could be incredible at the company. What do you want to do here? How do I help you get there? And open dialogue with your manager and peers is really important. And I think that's something that we teach. I just came out of a workshop that I taught this afternoon around building influence. And you don't have to be senior to do that. You can do that in any stage. And so much of it comes down to people skills, relationship building, and communication. And so those are simple things that we can teach.
Of course, yeah, and it doesn't have to be, like you said, coming just for, like, the executives. It can be for
Exactly.
everyone.
It shouldn't actually.
Yeah.
It should start way down, and then throughout your career pathing, you're getting those different touch points, right? And by the way, there are plenty of people that don't ever want to be in the C-suite. They want to stay where they are. They want a good work-life integration, if you want to call it that, balance, but they still want to be recognized. They still want to feel invested in. They still want to be acknowledged. You can do that in so many different ways.
Well, and let's talk about that for a second because you make a really good point. There is this like new wave of, I'll say mostly women pushing back and saying, we don't love this, new wave feminism. We don't want to be doing this girl boss
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
anymore. Like, we're good. We want to move back to more traditional values. And we're seeing that, in the narrative and in the
Yep.
dialogue. I'm curious how that's affected, your community or what your thoughts are generally there.
So I have such a like a love-hate relationship with this word because in finance that was not even a term, right? It was like you're a boss, right? Like that's what you aspired to be, a better leader, a better manager, etc. If that's what you wanted. So when I became a founder and it was like right when that term was like exploding, I'm like, okay, let's like embrace it because I am now a woman founder and I am a girl boss. It's been bastardized. It has been overused. Same with the word community for the goods and the bads, right? I think all people that are not effective in running their businesses, and by the way, this is not gender specific, um, need to be called out. They need to change. They need to adjust styles. They need to invest in their own, sort of skills development. I think with what's happened with Girl Boss is that it's just become so negative to want to be aspire to be that boss or that leader. But also on the flip side is like, I don't want to be that. And so if I don't want to be that, is that make me any less ambitious or driven? Absolutely not. there is a guy, I did an op-ed a couple of years when I started talking about the power middle, a guy that worked for me in one of the firms that I worked at. And he's based in Buffalo. And I'm also a great leader in the office, and people come to me and I mentor others. But all I heard when I left that meeting was, why would you tell your boss or your boss's boss's boss that you're not a superstar? Right? This could potentially be your one interaction. So I walked out of thinking, well, that guy, I'm writing him off. Sorry, Richard. But I didn't, because then when I got on that plane home, I reflected and I was like, well, wait a second. Why am I having a negative reaction to this? Let me just look at his performance over the years. And I was new into to that line of business. It was super consistent. He just didn't want to be up here. He was happy being in the middle, producing, getting acknowledged, getting paid, being offered opportunities. Now, and by the way, he was a great performer and he was a great, for all the years that I worked there, he was fabulous. But then I asked myself, if a woman said that, would I have a different reaction? And it probably would be. And I'm very transparent about this. I probably would have said, they're not ambitious enough. She doesn't really want it. I'm going to move on. That was a hard realization for me as a woman. And as you can see, that impacted me so much. And so as I think about this idea of girl boss, or I want to be in the C-suite, or I want to be my own boss, it's like you've got to feel comfortable, whatever term you're using for yourself, with that term. If you want to identify as a girl boss, go for it. If you just want to be a boss or a founder versus a woman founder or a Black founder, you have to feel comfortable with that identification, and don't let somebody else tell you what you are or you aren't.
Mm-hmm. And I think, first of all, that is amazing. It makes complete sense. And I appreciate your self-awareness and honesty on that one. Cause like I've definitely had situations where I've had to reflect and be like, oh, okay, maybe that was my own like bias coming
Totally.
into it.
Totally.
And like that sort of reflection is so needed. How do you work with women that kind of want to just stay a little smaller, and that's what they want, and maybe they want to be like, mothers and caregivers, and that's their
Sure.
journey. Yeah.
I think again, it comes back to, you've got to be comfortable with whatever you decide. And by the way, there are many seasons in your life and your career. So maybe right now you're focused on being a caregiver or a stay-at-home mom, and you've got to be comfortable with that and own that. That's a decision you're making. And by the way, it's an amazing decision because kids need so much love and care and guidance. If you are not feeling confident, you've got to work at confidence, right? Part of that is being able to recognize your strengths, recognize your accomplishments, recognize what you bring to the table in whatever you're doing, if that's a mom, if that's a founder, if that's working at a bank. The second is being able to actively talk about it. Self-advocacy, self-promotion, women are historically poor at it. But yet we're actually the ones that need it even more because of where we're at in the workforce and the pay scale, just equity overall. And so we teach a workshop around self-advocacy. How do you get better at it? It's a muscle that you need to flex. You've got to put real work and practice in it. And that first time you ever talk about yourself when you're not used to doing it, it feels really uncomfortable.
It feels cringy.
Totally.
Like
It
you
feels like
physically feel cringy.
yes. Or I'm bragging. And I say this all the time. It's not bragging if it's based on fact, but doesn't mean it's easy.
Mhm.
So if the first step is just writing things down, we go through this exercise. It's like, write them down. Like, rip the Band-Aid off and write them down. Most people, in particular women, overthink and go, oh, is this really what I should be proud about? Write it down. And don't, again, overanalyze, overthink, worry about what Jade's going to think of it or Kate's going to think about it. What do I think about it? And then you can call that down and say, okay, these are the top 3 things that I want people to know about me. And let's now change the whole narrative or rebuild my story. Maybe you're a caregiver or a mom and you're coming back into the workforce and you've taken time out. Let's reframe that story, like that narrative. And the second thing we do outside of that is a SWOT analysis, which again is very tactical. People go, what? Most people have done it in a company for a project or a product launch. It's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. These are very tactical things that you can do to sort of see where you're at today and what are the things that you need to work on. What are the strengths that you can play to? Also, what opportunities are coming up that you might have not missed because you were under that, I don't have the skills. I'm not confident enough. I don't have the network. Okay, you can build those. And women are great at it.
But we are. I'm going to do that later.
I'm telling
Thanks
you,
for the tip. I'm actually going to go home.
such a great exercise. And if you're listening and you're about to go into like a year-end conversation, also a great tool to just see where you're at, where you have self-identified where your strengths, weaknesses are, and then maybe even have that conversation with a manager and say, do you feel the same? Like, do you see these areas of opportunity and development for me? Do you see these as my strengths? Am I missing something? Another way to have dialogue with your manager or a peer.
And that just like opens up the conversation more and it makes you so much more approachable.
And it makes you more confident.
Yes, very true. Well, speaking of kind of having confidence around these more difficult conversations, you've actually opened up your kind of community to both men and women, which I love.
Yeah.
I have a female focused company as well. We have men that work at our company though. Like we do. We have male like editors, we have men on the finance side. Like so it's absolutely something that we're not like we will not hire,
Sure.
men. We just hire more women because it makes sense with the content that we do. So it's not really like, oh, we
Exactly.
have to do this. So with that, what sort of tips do you have to like bring men into the conversation? Because I do feel like we're scaring them. And I also feel like they're probably walking on eggshells. And I feel like it's made everything really tricky over the last couple of years because men are either like, I don't want to come off and get me too'd, or they're like, I don't know what to say to you. But then it feels like from a woman's perspective, you have these really like flat relationships where the men can't really actually be themselves. And it just feels like a lot of awkwardness all around. So how do we just not have that?
So, well, well, first of all, collectively, like no change is created in an echo chamber, right? Like the things that I would love to change for women in the workforce, again, pay parity, gender equity, equal opportunity, can't happen just by women talking about it. It's got to be collectively all genders. And since there are more male leaders in the world, we need that. Right. And also we need to create allyship with them. So to your point, they're not walking on eggshells. They're not thinking they're not going to have a job. All of my mentors in finance were men. And part of the reason was, yes, they saw something in me, but there was dialogue created and we could have real conversations. I think a lot of what's missing in the world is just open door dialogue. We're different. We're going to have different perspectives, but you got to be open to that. And I think one of the reasons why when I started the business that we wanted to make sure men were welcomed, not just they could come, but that they were part of the community is because again, we can't do this alone. It's going to take both sides to come together. And one of the things that we've seen with the companies that we work for is advocating that, yes, maybe we're working just with their women's network inside the company, but we feel like they should open up the programming to everyone. When you do that, and I've watched it literally, virtually and physically, when you open up that door for anybody to participate, the light bulb goes off.
Really?
Because I'm not now feeling like I'm excluded. We have likely been the only woman in the room. In some scenarios, it's not a bad thing to have a man be the only man in the room because now they are putting themselves in the other person's shoes and saying, oh, this is kind of awkward, right? Oh, how do I use my voice in this situation? How do I talk? So I think it's such a great learning opportunity. It's also just a great way for people to address issues, and the elephant in the room is no longer there. All the things that I just talked about, confidence, insecurity, communication, advocacy, men experience that too. They may not talk about it as much. They may experience it in a different way. but they are equally wanting to invest in themselves and their skills. So let's give them that opportunity. I find when you're doing it together, you find better relationships, you create much better win-win scenarios, you create better advocates and partners with one another, and ultimately a much more productive team and or leaders, managers, and higher performers.
That's amazing. I'm sure you probably get like the best types of men that are like put themselves out there to be in like this sort of a situation where maybe they're not going to be the most comfortable, but they're willing to kind of like
Mhm.
try and open themselves up. So I'm sure you have like a really good set of like men that are a part of the network.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not. They're sort of going, "What is this? Do I feel welcome?" And
Yeah,
and
fair.
and let me try this out. I think the other thing that I've seen in a lot of organizations, which I absolutely love, is managers of women and that identify as male coming onto these sessions to be able to one reinforce their support of that employee or employees to pat them on the back live, like in front of other people, because that also that is such a big part of this acknowledgement and recognition, and I think goes back to how employees are feeling today. Like they're not being acknowledged, they're not being recognized, they don't feel invested in. A lot of what they got during the pandemic is being taken away. And so we're not in the great resignation anymore, right? We're now in a market where employers are holding the power.
Yep.
So if you are an employee and then yes, you need a job, you want to continue working, then you've got to find ways to, pull from your company, one, that investment in you, but also push a bit too around what are your aspirations? What do you want to do there? What does your runway look like? And again, goes back to having real conversations.
That's amazing. Well, something that we have that's a little bit similar is, for us, we work with brand partners as well. But something that I personally have struggled with is when we make content for them, it's hard to always show like the exact value.
Mm,
We would like to break things down with KPIs. Of course, that's everything from like views,
sure.
impressions, like all of that, like hard data. I'm curious from your perspective, as you work with these incredible brand partners, what does that look like for you in terms of how you are able to show like tangible value to them rather than just feeling like, okay, they're checking like some sort of box?
So there is that, like you that just mentioned the KPIs, impressions, engagement, if it's an event, attendance. But I think the anecdotal examples of and today I'll give you again, I'll give a real life. So Audi is a big partner. They have been for the last couple of years, and people will go Audi, Luminary. Well, Audi recognizes that 80% of all car buying decisions are either made or influenced by women. So they need to be talking to women more. What a great way to do that is through the Luminary community, since 80% of our members identify as women. And so we have created a whole campaign with Audi around she drives. How do we, again, pardon the pun, but it's part of it, around how do I drive my career, my community, my business, my family, my compensation, and really having real dialogue. This morning we had a breakfast, and Audi was our partner, and uh, people were just organically talking about the impact that these events and this messaging and this campaign has had. So for Audi, and I'm speaking on their behalf, they're going, this is really leaving a mark. And even if today they don't go out and buy an Audi, organically they're remembering Audi. They're thinking about that brand loyalty, because this is can't be transactional. Customers are smart. We're the smartest consumers have ever been because of technology and the internet. So they want to feel, just like we all do, invested in. We want to feel like companies understand who we are and they value who we are and our feedback. And sometimes, yeah, I'm going to buy that makeup because it's an Instagram ad, or it's going to take a little time, but I want that connectivity to a brand that I feel is also putting their money where their mouth is.
That's really good advice, and I'm sure a lot of brands are seeing, like, success with this program. Because 'cause you're right, it's also generational. Like, if someone's mom is recommending an Audi car, then the daughter goes and gets one day for herself. It's how you speak about, like, cars in the family, what
Yeah.
they value, all of it. So it's also a generational thing as well.
Yeah, and listen, we want to buy from organizations that we feel listen to us. And even though we love convenience, I will choose putting my money behind a company that has values alignment over price any day of the week.
Just to wrap up here, I'm very curious, when you have so much like so much constant communication with your full community and all of your community members, what are some trends that you've seen that separates people from really getting the career that they do want versus those who kind of don't? And the career that you want doesn't necessarily, as we spoke about before, have to be like that executive high
Mhm.
level. It's more like just actually figuring out what makes that person happy.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think that there are still a huge population, in particular within this country, that are underserved and don't have access to the right opportunities. Or generationally, they're being held back because of where they were born into or the lives that they were born into, and they just don't have the access. And so I think that's a big issue that we have in the country. And I think a lot of what holds people back is fear. And this constant second guessing, am I good enough to do this? And I don't have the skills for this. Um, you might not, but you can get them, right? And again, it depends on what they are. I think on the flip side, I think companies in particular need to take more risk on people, meaning maybe they're not ready right this second, but how are they going to get ready if you don't give them an opportunity? Historically, for women, it has been, oh, she's just not ready yet. They are promoted on performance versus potential. And so that has to change. We need to look at both potential and performance across the board at whatever level you're at. And that's from the employer standpoint. From the employee standpoint, again, it starts with advocating for yourself. What are you doing? What are your accomplishments? What value do you bring to the team and the organization? And many of us have been told, keep your head down, work hard. Yes, work hard. Absolutely work hard, but keep your head up. You need to be visible and highly engaged so that if your aspiration is you do want to ascend to the C-suite, if your aspiration is you just want to have a good life right now and you're balancing your whole life and caregiving and whatever that is, then make those aspirations known, because no one is a mind reader.
Mm-hmm.
As the best managers I've ever had and leaders, even though great that they're not mind readers. So you have to, again, it goes back to dialogue and communication, and you don't ask, you don't get.
Very true. And just as we wrap up here, what is one piece of advice you wish you could go back and tell yourself when you first started your company?
Ooh. Well, it goes back to something I said this morning, and it's something that my mom has told me throughout my life. I think there's a tendency to sort of go, "Oh my gosh, I can't make it through another day. It's so hard. It's so lonely." In the end, it'll be all right. And if it's not all right, then it's not the end.
Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
For me personally, best place is LinkedIn, Cate Luzio, Cate with a C. Instagram, if you want to see a lot of fashion and cats, follow me there. And then Luminary, you can follow weareluminary.com on Instagram and TikTok. It's We Are Luminary. Facebook, it's Luminary. LinkedIn, it's Luminary.
Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please follow us on socials at Bird's Eye Pod and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We launch new episodes every week.